If I'm speaking my whole truth right now, Amazon inspired this episode. And I know you're expecting maybe an Amazon haul, Amazon favorites. No. None of that. Amazon's bogus return to work policy is what has inspired today's episode. So, hi, what's up? Welcome back. Welcome to another episode of the Straight Shooter Recruiter podcast. My name is Emily Durham. I'm your host. I'm your producer. And baby, it's Wednesday. It's one of my favorite days of the week. This is my What Would Emily Do episode. Today, we're going to dive deep on all of the nonsense surrounding work from home, surrounding quote unquote hybrid work. I want to explain a little bit what's going on, what is happening with hybrid work. Is remote work going to disappear? We're going to get into all of that. We're going to get into some of your questions. And mostly, I just want to chat because I don't think we're talking enough about how unbelievably crazy it is that some of these organizations, particularly the organizations that were spearheading work from home, were champions for work from home, are suddenly saying, babes, you know, it would be great if I could see you back in the office 5 days a week. Crazy to me. So if you are someone who is working in an environment where you're kind of scared you're going to get called back to work, maybe it's already happened, maybe you're wondering what companies you should and shouldn't apply to, this is the episode for you. And as always, a friendly little reminder that this show is my baby, and you know what makes me so happy? It's when I see you loving it. So thank you for sharing the show on socials. Thank you for leaving a rating and a review. And if you haven't, I'll wait. I will. Okay, have you done it? Okay, thank you. Let's get into it. Okay, so first things first, what is going on with Amazon and why did this inspire an entire episode? I'll definitely get into our polls and all of that good stuff. And if you're new to the show, the OGs know that every single week over on Instagram, I post our questions, our polls, basically everything we talk about in our Wednesday episodes, y'all interact with over on Insta. So make sure that you are tuning in, you're with the family so you know what's going on and you get to have a huge say in what happens in this episode. But basically, I woke up, whatever day it was this week, the day that Amazon broke the news, and I was like, what? Amazon, pardon? So for context, most companies during the pandemic, the little panorama that we had, obviously were work from home. Unless you were deemed an essential worker, you were working from home. And a lot of companies saw immense benefits. People were actually working more hours, which in my opinion is not healthy, not good for anybody. But people were typically working more, which means employees were giving more hours, getting more output done. They were more productive. A lot of companies actually saw positive returns on people working from home. And it was that, plus there was a fundamental mindset shift in the scope of careers and work. So during the pandemic, there was something called the Great Resignation, which basically was like a global phenomenon. It wasn't exclusive to Canada or to the US, but it was essentially where employees were saying, y'all are expecting me to work 40 plus hours a week. I'm working from home and I'm suffering through the emotional strain that is living through a pandemic. And people hit a brick wall where it was like, all these companies are telling me they care, telling me they value me, but they're also telling me to clock in. They're telling me to come into work through something that is undeniably tragic, that is undeniably stressful. Imagine being a parent, having to school your child at home, having kids at home while you're working. It fundamentally reshaped our relationship to work. In addition to that, because employers, companies that were hiring, were able to hire internationally now because everyone was working from home. And if you were a small company in the US, you could hire from a small town in Canada and pay half the price for the same talent. They were creating thousands of more jobs. Amazon did this a lot. Meta/Facebook did this a lot. A lot of massive tech companies hired crazy volume because they're like, it's cheap. I can get cheap labor. They hire all of these people. There's so many more jobs than there are job seekers. So all the power was in us as employees, which is why people quit, which is why people got picky, which is why we could say, listen, B word. I don't know why I was going to cuss, but you can basically say listen, I'm going to work from home or I'm going to quit because someone else will hire me remotely. And that became the wave. Everyone hopped on the remote work train. You look at Shopify. They literally, I live in Toronto. I actually used to work at this building called The Well. It's a brand new building in Toronto. This was the new shiny, everybody wanted a piece of The Well. This was a nice new building. Intuit is there. Netflix is there. Shopify is there. Shopify invests, I want to say it was $2 billion, but I might be wrong, so don't quote me on that, in this real estate. So they were renting it. They have a multi-year lease. They literally 5 weeks before they're meant to move in, announced that they're fully remote. All that money down the drain. I think they still keep that space for events, but they're certainly not getting their full return on that, obviously, because employees aren't in all the time. But I share that to say the move to remote work first became so foundational to the tech space that it started to impact other industries. Finance started to do the same things. And now the new norm was either you are fully remote or you're too maybe 3 days a week in the office. And then things started to shift post-pandy. I would actually say in the last 2 years. If you were looking for a job in the pandemic, depending on your industry, it actually could have been wicked easy. In tech, you could find a job like this. It was so competitive. I remember recruiting for engineering roles and I was like, oh my God, no one is responding to my messages. Candidates did not need me. I needed them. And then things started to shift. And Meta, girl, I'm talking to you. Meta, for example, hired 21,000 people over the course of the pandemic. That's great. I love that. Except then they did an entire layoff. They laid off, I want to say 11,000 people. So they still had, incremental growth from the size of the overall team. But they ultimately told 11,000 people to go home. How is that ethical? How is creating 21,000 jobs okay if you only intend to keep half of them? So you create jobs to eliminate jobs, you leave people unemployed. A lot of companies did that. I'm singling out Meta because that one really broke the news. But if you look at all of these other major tech companies, they all did the same thing. And then suddenly we had way more job seekers than we had jobs. And it's we were right back to a pre-pandemic world. And we were all oh my God, all the power is in the employer's hands again. We don't get to be picky. I don't get to tell you where I want to work. And employers looked at that and went, here's what we're going to do. And to be honest with you, I highly doubt employers were actively oh, it's an employer's market. Let's just go back to work in the office. There's a lot of reasons. One of the biggest reasons that I can't even say it with a straight face. One of the biggest reasons people push for being in the office is to create a sense of community and to foster workplace culture. Girl, you know what culture I'd like to foster? The one at home. The one with me, myself, and I. How about that? I do think there are benefits to being in the office. You get to have more casual conversation. You do miss out on networking. There are benefits to being in the office. However, there are so many benefits to work from home. Think of people who are also in school while they're working. Think of single mothers. Think of folks with disabilities where it's very emotionally and physically exhausting to get into the office. There are real tangible benefits and proven studies that show we are more productive when we work from home versus working in the office. I remember going back to the office and being people keep stopping by my desk. I'm so distracted. I'm getting nothing done. I would socialize all day during the workday when I was in the office, and I'd end up working overtime when I was working from home the next day. And it became this cycle. And I understand that the value of being in the office was around community and connection, but there are other ways to get that than just being in the office. And that's not to say that I'm anti-hybrid work. I personally really like hybrid work. I like to get out of the house. I like to have 2 or 3 days a week. Where I think return to work and hybrid work gets really messy is when it becomes prescriptive. How are you going to tell me how I'm most productive? Every single person is different. Who are you to say this is what works for you? And I understand there's company mandates, yada, yada. But this whole notion of this is how we foster community is only true for some people. It not only fits the mold for certain people. The reality is there's 2 things at play here. With all of these companies, and I'll talk some SHIT about Amazon shortly, but with all of these companies going, yeah, we're hybrid 2 days a week. Suddenly it's 3 days. Suddenly it's 4 days. Suddenly it's 5 days a week in the office, which, by the way, 5 days a week in the office wasn't even a thing before the pandemic. They're saying it's for company culture. It's not. Do you want to really know what it's for? The first is they've invested so much money in corporate real estate that having it sit there empty is bad for business. In this press release, they talked about a bit of a hiring conundrum, or a people's conundrum, I would say. Amazon basically said that because of some of the quote unquote hiring that they've done, there is a mismatch of management to individual contributors. So there's I can't remember if it was too many individual contributors, not enough managers, or vice versa. I'm pretty sure it was too many managers, not enough individual contributors, and that there is going to be some company restructuring. It is not lost on me that that's the same thing Meta said when they did a massive layoff. They said, we actually hired too many layers of people. It was not productive. We had to cut. This isn't news. Having too many layers of management is that's not net new information to people. Obviously, if there's too many layers, you can't get things done. So Amazon saying, yeah, and plus our team structure is a little bit different. We're going to have some restructuring. Why do you think they had that in the same press release? It's 100% because they want people to voluntarily leave the organization so they don't have to pay out certain people. So they don't have to pay you X amount of money to leave the company when they do their mass layoff, because they will have to give some degree of severance for most individuals unless they're trying to get sued. But that's not my business. And I'm not a lawyer, so who knows? This is all allegedly, by the way. Allegedly. Not that allegedly. Whatever. So basically, they are telling people to come back into the office, do all of, this corporate bonding, whatever. Oh, but by the way, there's like some restructuring going on. They're waiting for people to voluntarily quit. And the top talent who does not want to work in the office 5 days a week, the people who sign job offers where this was not a part of the plan, are going to leave. And suddenly Amazon gets to say, oh, people voluntarily left the company, so it's actually not a layoff. It's a layoff. They are pushing people out and making it impossible for them to stay. Is that not bananas to you? I actually had someone on Instagram ask me if that's illegal, because it's like you're fundamentally changing the job. And there's a term in employment law called constructive dismissal, which is basically when, it can be a lot of things, but it's basically when you fundamentally change the nature of somebody's job, or you make it so untenable for that person to do their job that they really have no choice but to quit. And that's constructive dismissal. You've made it impossible for me to continue this job, so I have to leave. And then I can sue you because you made it impossible for me to continue this job. It's like I'm a painter and you refuse to give me paintbrushes at work. You've made it impossible for me to do this job, so I can sue you. That's a very reduced example of that. The challenge with these company-wide policies, and I have a very limited employment law background. I took courses, but I'm not even close to a lawyer. But from what I have read, and my understanding is that because these changes and impacts actually go across the organization, they're company-wide, they're policy-wide. It's not targeting an individual. So from a legal perspective, it's a company business decision. It's not an individual decision. So you can't sue them for changing the way that they're structuring their company. That's a business call. And I'm sure there's justification enough on paper, but if you read between the lines, you know what it means. So it's really, really fascinating to me. I say all of this to say, if you are job hunting, or if you're at a company, maybe you work at Amazon, and you're like, okay, where do I go where I know they're not going to pull the rug out from under me, and suddenly I have to be in the office 5 days a week? What I want to tell you is you will never know that. This is why we cannot have true, authentic loyalty to any employer. I have worked at companies that I have friggin' loved, rode hard for, adored them. They did mass layoffs after saying they would never do mass layoffs. I've worked at companies where they're like, we care about our people so much. Axed an entire team like this. Every single industry does this. You can only be so loyal to an organization. If you are job hunting, go on Reddit, go on Fishbowl, go into chat forums and see what people are talking about, because people were starting to talk about these Amazon changes a couple of months ago online. And although it wasn't 100% set in stone, at least you have a vibe check of what's going on at that company. There are a few companies I can already anticipate are going to do the exact same thing. No comment. There are some companies that are going to do the exact same thing. It won't be small tech. My prediction is banking. My prediction is public service and government. They're all going to be, I think we're actually going to overcorrect so hard from pre-pandemic. It's actually going to be even more in office than it was before. I want to get to what y'all think about this whole remote work thing and some of your questions. But my big piece of advice for job seekers, for people at work, is never stop interviewing, because you never know when it's your company that's going to do this. There's no way to truly predict it. But if you're constantly interviewing and you constantly have networking relationships, it puts you in a position of power. I guarantee the people who constantly interview, who currently work at Amazon, are calling up friends being like, okay, I'm ready. Yep, let's move. Let's do this. I think that's going to be so powerful in your career. Do not let yourself ever get comfortable at a company, because these companies don't care about us as people, dude. Guess what they care about? Bottom line. They care about attrition. They care about their business. They do not care about us as people, period. You cannot love something that's going to not love you back. You can only love your job so much. And to be honest, I should take that advice with dating. My Instagram poll, I asked y'all, what would you prefer? Do you prefer hybrid 1 to 3 days a week, fully remote, or fully in office? Only 6% of you said fully in office. And to be honest, I thought it would have been less. I'm not going to lie to you. 40% of you want full remote, and 54% want hybrid 1 to 3 days a week. See, this is the thing. I think hybrid is amazing because you get the best of both worlds. Where hybrid fails is how companies have changed what hybrid meant. When we first started working in a hybrid capacity, every single company was praising that it's flexible, it's on your terms, you pick what days work for you, you do your heads down work at home, and you come in to build relationships with the team. That's where I think hybrid is so valuable. It's all about understanding the benefit of being in office, which is team connection, which yes, you can get in other ways, but it is a great opportunity to network, build relationships, whatever. And then the heads down work is at home. What pisses me off is companies now are saying, oh, this is what hybrid is. Yeah, hybrid is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. Okay, how hybrid is that? How flexible is that? Basically, I'm just on your schedule. Like, you're not actually empowering me to do the work that I need to do here at all. So I asked, what are some of your gripes, pain points, questions, and comments around hybrid work? And I'm curious to hear how each of your different work experiences and industries kind of impacts your perspective on this. I had a whole bunch of you who are not happy at all. One of y'all said, this is a disaster. What the heck are these people doing? They're playing with people's mental peace. I could not agree more, because imagine I told you the sky is blue today and the sky is red tomorrow, and I kept going back and forth. These mixed messages do not create psychological safety in the workplace, and I really dislike that. Someone had asked, I wish I could do hybrid or fully remote, but my boss is super old school. How can I ask for it? Here's the thing, my friend. First of all, thank you for asking that question. It's risky. Every company is a little bit different. If you are in a position where you're like, I really need to be hybrid or work from home, be prepared to be told no. Because a lot of these companies are following a company-wide mandate or policy. Very rarely will they make an exception for an individual person. If you have a case, for example, you have a child at home, you have a new puppy, they might be able to make these exceptions. But I would say be prepared to be met with negativity, because that's historically what I've seen, if I'm being totally honest with you. I think it's a good idea to sit down with your boss, ask for performance feedback. Hey, boss, great working with you. How are you feeling about my performance? All is well? Great. I wanted to chat a little bit about flexibility with in-office time, and then lead it from a productivity perspective. I personally feel like I am most productive when I work from home. And although I love coming into the office to build relationships and collaborate, I think I'm best and most optimal when I'm able to balance both. I wanted to know, is there ever going to be flexibility, or is there an opportunity for flexibility around hybrid or potentially remote work? And then stop talking. You know what I always say, silence is the best negotiation tool and tactic. See what they come back with. I would say, it depends on the culture of your company, but most companies that I have worked with have been very like, nope, that's our policy. Get on board or get off. And that's tricky, because then you need to decide for yourself, am I willing to stay? Or, am I going to start looking for another job? I absolutely love hybrid. I like one day in the office. It's enough to socialize with my team, but doesn't suck the energy out of my soul. That's something we don't talk about enough. Being in the office takes your energy from 100 to like -3, because you're constantly socializing. And when you see less of people, it's like there's more to catch up on. People pop by your desk. You're talking. You're doing everything. You're distracted, but then you're so emotionally exhausted. I'm an extrovert, and even I get drained. And I get energy from talking to people, but even I get drained. This was actually a really common theme as well, is with hybrid and return to work, a lot of organizations removed personal desks. So now it's community spaces, lockers, whatever. The problem is, you do show up to go to work, you do show up to go to the office, you have nowhere to sit, nowhere to put your stuff, nowhere to hang your hat, nowhere to call home. So you want me to come into the office, lug my stuff back and forth, and you don't even have a desk for me? Like, it's like these companies don't actually think about what needs to happen here. We talked a lot in my DMs about the commute and how it feels like your workday goes from 8 hours to 12 hours, because some people have an 1.5 to 2 hour commute each way. And it's like, you're not paying me more to come into the office. And yes, I know I took this job and it's far, but when I can do more work at home, like imagine I used that extra hour a day of commuting or 2 hours a day to work, I would be so much more productive instead of me sitting on a train waiting to get into the city. A lot of you said too, it's about surveillance and making sure you're working the entire time. There is a lot of drama around people allegedly not being productive as they work from home. And it's true, a lot of organizations want to physically see you in the office to be like, hey, do you work like you say you work? What's interesting to me though, is if you actually look at outputs from work from home versus hybrid versus entirely in the office, the highest return on investment is work from home. You get the most done when you work from home. It's bananas to me. And think of all the idle time that you waste grabbing coffee with people, chit-chatting with people. So what if I take half an hour to do my laundry? I was taking an hour and 30 minutes to talk to people in the hallway over the course of the day. It's so, honestly, I didn't expect all of you to love hybrid as much as you do, but I think what we really need to be thoughtful of, especially if you're interviewing or you're looking for jobs, A, like I said, never get too comfortable. B, ask questions in the interviews. Great, you guys are hybrid. Is it defined days? How do you think about flexibility? If I have a week where I can't come in or a week where I want to come in more, what does that look like? Do I have a locker? Do I have a desk? Because honestly, it is hard to go to a workspace where you don't even have like a place to be comfortable, a place to plant your roots. How do you plan for meetings when we come into the office? Because I had that too. I worked with a lot of international teams. And when I would come into the office, I spent the whole day sitting on Zoom. And I was like, why am I here? Like, why did I put on this corporate outfit, sit at a desk that I can't even leave stuff at because someone else is going to sit here tomorrow to sit on Zoom when I could be at home? Like, it's just, and then I'm paying for dog care. People pay for childcare. It's like, you gave us this promise. Actually, here's a hot take. My compensation stayed the exact same when I was working through the pandemic, working from home. And now you want me to come into the office even more than before the pandemic, 5 days a week. Now, once again, I need to pay for childcare. I need to pay for gas. I need to pay for all of the things you said I wouldn't have to pay for because you said we were going to be hybrid or work from home for the foreseeable future for a very long time. And you haven't raised my salary. You raised the expectation of me in the office. No problem, babe. I cannot wait to see that reflected on my salary. How about that? Hybrid's crazy to me, y'all. I think we are going to see a fundamental shift in the way that we work. I think we're actually going to be an all-in-office culture very soon. I think we're going to see a lot of companies do this. And then I think it'll correct to be somewhere hybrid. I think in a few years, we'll land at true flexible hybrid for most companies. But I think before that, Amazon is setting a scary tone. And because Amazon is such a behemoth of a company, companies are going to follow suit. Tech's going to follow suit. I promise you, give it 5 months. I bet you every major bank in Canada is going to go 4 to 5 days a week. That's just my gut. That's just what I think is going to happen. But if y'all have more questions, if y'all want to chit chat, make sure you are submitting them in the link in the description because you know I love hanging out with you. I love gossiping. So what would Emily do? Emily would never stop interviewing, babe. Emily would never get too comfortable at a company. I'll tell you that right now. But thank you guys so much, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.